Number 12. Stolen PlayStation leads to stabbing. When Jake Bellotta's PlayStation disappeared in 2018, he suspected his former roommate, Joshua Barnes, of stealing the console. Barnes had recently been evicted for non-payment of rent and had left the front door to the apartment in Maitland, Florida, unlocked when he moved out. Bellotta was angry about it, and he also suspected Barnes of breaking back into the unit and taking the PlayStation, along with a bong and a weed scale. A third roommate, Ian McClurg, would later tell authorities that Bellotta was beyond pissed about the alleged theft. In fact, he was so mad he supposedly punched a hole in the wall. But Bellotta's anger didn't end there. Adding to his outrage was the fact that Barnes was reportedly bragging to others about stealing the PlayStation, and because Bellotta was now worried that others would break into the apartment. According to McClurg, he was also intent on getting his missing property back and devised a plan to lure Barnes to the residence. Bellotta allegedly invited his former roommate to a made-up event and promised that there would be women there. When Barnes arrived at the apartment, Bellotta stabbed him 17 times while McClurg watched. Before Bellotta and McClurg could wrap the victim's body up in garbage bags like they planned, their new roommate arrived home and dialed 911 as soon as he saw the carnage inside. In a chilling recording of the call, the unnamed roommate told the dispatcher that there had been a homicide at his home and that he knew there were ongoing problems between the suspects and the victim, but that he didn't know exactly what happened because he had just arrived home. When the dispatcher asked him how he knew Barnes was dead, he said that the victim was laying on top of a plastic bag and not moving. The terrified caller also expressed his fear that the perpetrators would do something to hurt him and his girlfriend. Officers found McClurg in the bathroom and they apprehended Bellotta in a shopping plaza parking lot. Bellotta told the responding cops that Barnes was the aggressor and that he killed the victim in self-defense. But his story didn't hold up in court. He was convicted of murder and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. McClurg pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact and tampering with evidence and was sentenced to 10 years behind bars. Number 11. Drunk driver destroys his own family. Just weeks into the 2023 new year, a speeding car struck a barrier along a Staten Island highway during the early morning hours. The vehicle then slammed into a utility pole and a brick wall with such force that it broke into 3 pieces. It was so mangled it was barely recognizable. The driver, 30-year-old Adam Nikizic, was seriously injured. His pregnant 23-year-old fiancée, Adriana Silmatage, was also injured and launched from the passenger seat. She and the couple's unborn baby lost their lives. A responding officer had to cut Nikizic out from his seatbelt. He allegedly told the cops that another vehicle cut him off, but according to a police report, he was unsteady on his feet, his speech was slurred, and he reeked of booze. Nikizic was unaware of the deaths of Simitage and the baby when he was wheeled into a courtroom a few days later in a hospital gown. He learned the horrific news that day when he was arraigned on manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, vehicular assault, and drunk driving charges. When he realized the extent of the tragedy, Nikizic broke down in tears, but his problems were just beginning. In late February, about a month after the wreck, a grand jury indicted him on a slew of upgraded charges, including depraved indifference murder and aggravated vehicular homicide. According to the indictment, Nikizic had a blood alcohol level of more than 0.18 on the day of the accident, more than twice the legal limit for driving in the state. It's rare for a murder charge to result from a drunk driving fatality, according to the New York Daily News, but prosecutors sometimes resort to the charge in cases where the driver was so reckless that they showed a complete disregard for human life. If convicted, Nikizic could face 15 years to life in prison. Number 10. Homebuyer resorts to arson to avoid purchasing house. John Pfeiffer Jr. had already committed to buying a $400,000 house in Newtown Township, Pennsylvania in 2014 when he realized that he couldn't afford it. In fact, he was more than aware of the fact that he lacked the resources to purchase the home. And instead of owning up to it, he entered the final negotiating stages with the owners and realtor, claiming that he planned to pay cash for the property. During the last night in their home before they planned to hand the keys over to Pfeiffer, the owners overheard what sounded like someone trying to break in. They called the police, who found Pfeiffer nearby in his vehicle. He claimed he was just driving around to familiarize himself with the area and agreed to go down to the police station for questioning. Officers performed a routine search of Pfeiffer and found a lighter, latex gloves, and other implements indicating that he was planning to commit an arson. In his vehicle, they found lighter fluid, hickory chips, and more latex gloves. He allegedly said the items were for a planned cookout, but his wife told the police that there was no planned cookout. Investigators concluded that Pfeiffer initially planned to pay for the house with a fraudulent cashier's check. Instead, he settled on burning it down to avoid following through with a deal that he knew he couldn't honor. His wife was just as unaware of this as she was about the alleged cookout. She told officers that just weeks earlier, Pfeiffer moved a family out of their home, claiming it was mold-infested, only to discover that they had been evicted for not paying rent. Pfeiffer told his wife that his parents had loaned him the money to buy the new house with. He was charged with burglary and other felony offenses in connection with the incident. Number 9. Former cop turns to burglary. Janelle Garrick was working as a sheriff's deputy in Jefferson County, Wisconsin, when she was busted for burglarizing people's homes while they were at their loved ones' funerals in 2018. According to authorities, she planned the crimes ahead of time by reading the obituaries, researching the deceased relatives, and figuring out where they lived. Knowing they would most likely be saying their final goodbyes at the person's service, she made her move. She was reportedly captured committing at least one home break-in on doorbell camera footage. Garrick was fired from her job and arrested the following year, but she apparently didn't learn her lesson. While she was out on bond for her pending charges, she was allegedly caught burglarizing yet another home about 60 miles, 96 kilometers west of Milwaukee. In this particular case, she was accused of stealing narcotic painkillers. Detectives connected Garrick to at least 6 burglaries through fingerprints on evidence left behind at the scenes. The prosecutor asked the judge for a 1-year prison sentence, but in a rare move, he imposed a harsher 2-year sentence followed by 3 years of probation. Garrick blamed her actions on her opioid addiction and agreed that she deserved punishment, but said that she felt she needed more help than was being offered. As they say though, do the crime, do the time. Number 8. Bride almost drowns on her wedding day. For reasons that aren't fully known, a bride jumped off a boat and into some water on her wedding day in 2017 and nearly drowned under the weight of her gown. Her photographer was there to capture the moment on camera, but instead of the memorable snapshot she was likely hoping for, she got stuck under the heavy, multi-layered dress. 5 bystanders jumped in to rescue her, but the trapped bride spent nearly half a minute enveloped by her attire before she was freed. It's unclear where the botched photo op occurred, but the Daily Mail speculated that it happened somewhere in the United States. Sadly, what seemed like a beautiful moment quickly turned into a nightmare, but luckily the newlywed emerged from the ordeal alive. Number 7. Botched break-in. A homeowner in Lake Seminole, Florida, awoke early in the morning one day in 2022 to someone trying to break into their house. They discovered a woman unlocking the front door after smashing through its window with a hammer, causing an estimated $400 in damages. Prepared to do whatever it took to protect themselves and their residence, the homeowner confronted the intruder with a gun and told her to leave. Jackson County deputies responded to the residence after receiving a call about a suspicious female, possibly under the influence of drugs, walking around the area. They identified the suspect as a 35-year-old New Mexico woman named Amber Montoya, who reportedly has a lengthy criminal history spanning 5 states. She was charged with burglary and criminal mischief. Jackson County Sheriff Donald Edenfield used the incident as an opportunity to remind the public that this type of behavior won't be tolerated and encouraged residents to defend themselves and their property by any means necessary. Number 6. Cat burglars get captured. A homeowner arrived at her residence in Indian River County, Florida one day in 2019 and was immediately put off when her pet cat didn't rush over to greet her like usual. She then noticed that her $1,200 flat-screen TV was missing and called 911 to report the burglary. Footage from a neighbor's surveillance camera showed the intruders entering the woman's home and leaving with the cat and the TV. The suspects were later identified as 32-year-old Martavis Owens and 32-year-old Nicole Marie White of Vero Beach. A deputy visited White and asked about the stolen property, and she admitted that she and Owens had sold a TV at a pawn shop. She still had the cat and a jewelry box that she stole from the victim, and she gave both to the deputy after admitting that the theft was a dumb idea. Authorities charged White and Owens with dealing in stolen property, giving false information to a pawnbroker, grand theft, and burglary. The arrests came just a year after the pair were nabbed during a traffic stop, along with a third suspect for drug and gun charges. Hopefully, since then, they've squared away their legal issues and have stayed out of trouble. Number 5. Reality TV stars rescued from deadly heat. One sweltering hot summer day in 2022, 8 women went to Camelback Mountain in Phoenix, Arizona to film themselves on a hike for a religious reality show called Bad Girls Gone God. Temperatures soared to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.8 degrees Celsius, and it wasn't long before the group became wildly uncomfortable. To say they were unprepared for the strenuous nature walk on Echo Canyon Trail would be an understatement. Cast member Kristen Livingston later told local station KPHO that the group was unaware that the planned walk was along one of Phoenix's most challenging trails. It's true, there's even a Facebook group called Please Don't Die or Have to Be Rescued on Camelback Mountain, Arizona, which is designed to warn people of the dangers associated with the trail. The ladies began the hike at around 7 o'clock in the morning, with each participant carrying just a single bottle of water for the day. By noon, they had broken up into several groups, with some forging on ahead, while others lagged behind. At that point, the women realized they were in danger due to the excruciating heat and their lack of preparedness. Thanks to their decision to promptly call for help, they all survived. Some of the participants were wheeled down the mountain, while others were lifted to safety via helicopter, and 3 of the rescued individuals were hospitalized in stable condition. Number 4. Mom quits parenting. Deputies from the Anderson County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina received an alarming call in June of 2022 when a boater spotted 3 unsupervised teenage siblings on Cemetery Island, locally known as Ghost Island. The kids reportedly said that they camped on the island the night before with their mother, Courtney Taylor, and her boyfriend, Eric Elrod. They told authorities that the adults said they were going to get water earlier that day, but never returned. Their vehicle was gone from its parking spot on the mainland. The sheriff's office initially considered Taylor a missing person and posted her photo online, along with an appeal to the public for information regarding her possible whereabouts. Elrod was also considered missing at first. Deputies eventually located the missing couple's vehicle. At some point, they determined that even though Taylor was nowhere to be found, she most likely wasn't in danger. They soon learned that she had allegedly been in contact with her ex-husband, who had taken the children into his car, and that she was seen in the area. Deputies picked Taylor up and charged her with 3 counts of child neglect. At the time the story broke, Elrod was still on the run and was wanted on suspicion of distributing methamphetamine. Number 3. Shoplifting with a cop. Every holiday season, it seems as though at least one person in the United States makes news headlines for being arrested for theft during a Shop with a Cop event, which are designed to bring law enforcement and local communities closer together. In late 2022, that honor went to a man named Brad, who was busted for allegedly stealing from a Walmart store in St. Cloud, Florida. According to the Osceola County Sheriff's Office, there were around 40 deputies present at the event, as well as a forensic team, a community service team, and Sheriff Marcos Lopez himself. In a Facebook post featuring a photo of the suspect, the agency described the alleged crime as a bad idea, and further wrote, "Seriously, we just can't make this up." Around the same time, another pair of suspects, Robert Crabtree and Amber Boyd, were nabbed at a similar event at a Meijer store in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Around 50 members of the Clark County Sheriff's Department and other law enforcement agencies were present when they had to stop what they were doing to arrest Crabtree, who was allegedly caught stealing in the middle of the act. Boyd was arrested about 45 minutes later as officers were checking out at the registers with their shoppers. Another noteworthy Shop with a Cop arrest came in 2018 during an event at a Target store in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. Some of the 15 cops who were in attendance noticed 2 women allegedly attempting to leave the store with a shopping cart containing around $1,900 worth of electronics that weren't paid for. Officers caught up with the pair, later identified as 18-year-old Dana Johnson and 40-year-old Kiana Wilson, and took them into custody on suspicion of felony retail fraud. Unfortunately, these examples weren't the first, and they certainly won't be the last of people trying to get away with blatant theft during Shop with a Cop events. Number 2. Hiking across the Bering Strait. In early 2006, a British national named Carl Bushby and an American citizen named Dmitry Kiefer set out to cross a frozen portion of the Bering Strait. This is a body of water that separates Alaska from Russia's Far East. Aside from the obvious dangers of the arduous trek across the 56-mile, 90-kilometer stretch of ice, the pair apparently failed to consider the issues they might have with Russian immigration authorities if they actually reached their destination. The hike was successful, and as one might predict, Bushby and Kiefer encountered problems after reaching Siberia. According to border security spokesperson Andrei Orlov, 2 men were arrested in Chukotka province for failing to register with the authorities, something they were required to do within 3 days of arriving, even if they had visas. While Orlov declined to specifically name the individuals who were arrested, it was pretty clear, based on the circumstances, that the men in question were Kiefer and Bushby. The timing also aligned with a blog entry on Bushby's website, which described how the pair reached Russia after 15 days of hiking. According to the site, Bushby crossed the Bering Strait as part of a round-the-world hike that he started 8 years earlier in 1998. His father, Keith Bushby, confirmed to the press that Bushby and Kiefer were detained shortly after their arrival in Russian territory. Bushby's last blog entry before he and Kiefer were nabbed by authorities stated that the 2 were in the village of Uelen, which is located near the point where the Chukchi Sea and the Bering Sea meet. He wrote that they were on their way to a city further down the coast to register with authorities. But the authorities evidently found them first, and because they did not enter the country at an official border crossing, their passports weren't stamped. Keith Bushby told the Associated Press that the incident didn't come as a total surprise to the travelers. In fact, they expected it, since they knew they would be entering a country at a very remote point with no designated entry point. But he said that if Russian officials denied the men permission to continue, it would unfortunately cut his son's journey short, which he hoped wouldn't happen. Luckily, a Russian appeals court ultimately gave them permission to continue after the British Prime Ministers and the governor of Chukotka got involved. Number 1. Government blamed for preventable disaster. In early March of 2023, parts of California were hammered by heavy rains that led to catastrophic flooding, leaving entire neighborhoods submerged and countless civilians stranded. Along the Pajaro River in Monterey County, a levee broke from the force of the overflowing water and inundated the farming town of Pajaro. Shortly after the disaster, rumors began to swirl about how authorities had long known of the levee's potential to break. They allegedly chose not to take any action to fix it because Pajaro was simply too poor for the government to care. In the words of the Los Angeles Times, officials didn't think it made financial sense to prioritize levee repairs to protect the low-income area. So what did they do? Absolutely nothing. Stu Townsley of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers told the Times that it was known by the early 1960s that the levees were probably not adequate for the water that the system gets. And experts revisited the matter several times over the years, but things never turned out favorably for Pajaro's residents in terms of benefit-cost ratios. According to an Army Corps web page dated to 2021, the outdated levee system was built in 1949. Since then, severe flooding has hit Pajaro on at least 5 occasions, including in 1995, when floodwaters breached the levees and caused 2 drowning deaths, along with an estimated $50 to $95 million in damages. Still, nothing was done to make the town safer. Pajaro was flooded again in 1997 and 1998, at which point then-President Bill Clinton issued a disaster declaration. Yet again, nothing was done. In January 2023, just a few months before the most recent flooding event, Pajaro's residents were evacuated for an entire week due to the risk of flooding. This, unfortunately, isn't surprising. As Monterey County Supervisor Luis Alejo pointed out, low-income neighborhoods and communities have always historically been ignored by state and federal governments. Sadly, it took repeated catastrophes for leaders to finally decide that it's a good idea to build a new levee system that can withstand the forces of nature. Thanks for watching. If a close friend who hates surprises got explosively angry at you for planning a surprise party thinking they'd actually enjoy it, would you feel apologetic or think they were overreacting? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!